This build is absolutely dominating the endgame in Path of Exile 2. Holy,
he just got destroyed.
we're one or two shotting rare mobs and killing bosses with ease. If you like a more involved build, this is the build for you. You'll be teleporting around, freezing groups of enemies, and dropping hammer nukes like it's nobody's business. If you like my content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. I'm also live on Twitch right now at twitch.tv/streamhard. Now let me break down the build for you. This build leverages the Chronomancer's cooldown abilities in order to be able to use Hammer of the God all the time. And Hammer of the Gods does insane damage with a really long cooldown. But not only do we have a chance to not use our cooldown, but we have an ability called Time Snap, which allows us to reset our cooldowns. And we have a support gem called Second Wind that allows us to use this twice. So between the 33% chance, our ability to reset cooldowns, and reduced cooldown of Time Snap using Ingenuity, and cooldown nodes on our passive tree, we're able to use Hammer of the Gods anytime we want. Now my first version of this build had Hammer of the Gods as the main focus, and it still is, but I've finessed the build to a spot where I like it a lot more. We're using Leap Slam to jump onto enemies and trigger Primed for Stun, which allows us to use Bone Shatter to kill the enemies. Our Bone Shatter setup lets us do a ton of damage. But if you jump in too deep and you need a quick out, we've got Temporal Rift, which will allow us to teleport away from where we were and back to where we were before. Not only that, it heals us and recovers our mana. Use this with caution though, because it can put you to a spot where you had less health and less mana if you use it at the wrong time. But this has an extremely short cooldown, so we can use this like a free flask anytime we need it. If we do happen to run out of our cooldowns, we can use our Mace Strike to deal a bunch of damage and stun enemies. Typically, I'll use this for bosses or straggler mobs when there's only one left. I don't have it yet, but Time Freeze is going to be another big part of this build. This allows you to freeze enemies in a big area around you. This will also give us the opportunity to drop our hammer, knowing that the enemy is not going to move during that window. Now this is the current version I have of the passive tree, and I don't have all my points yet, but I linked a build guide below so you guys can look at it yourself, and I'll make sure to drop a new video and also update the written guide whenever I have changes. For a passive skill tree, we're going to have to sacrifice multiple nodes at the start in order to get to where we actually want to be. It's unfortunate, but necessary. Feel free to grab raw power and the element of your choice in the early game in order to use spells for some more damage. You can always respec those points later and move over to the other side of the tree. Now, while I go through these, I'm going to tell you if they're maybes for me or requirements for the build, because I'm still working on perfecting what I want. So Viciousness is a nice to have, it's a maybe for me. The increased attack speed makes the build feel more fluid, and the dexterity is useful for hitting requirements on gear or gems. Down below, we've got Smash, which is a requirement for the build, because the amount of damage you get from it is undeniable. And we often utilize the heavy stun window as well. For just 2 additional points, we're also getting some increased area of effect, which is a nice quality of life for the build. The increased break armor is handy as well. Now I'm going to move to the left here first, and we're going to take a look at this side of the tree. So Split the Earth is probably the most significant node I can think of on the tree. And the reason for that is because Hammer of the Gods is so powerful that having a chance to cast it twice is amazing. And we have another node next to it, so this is actually a 10% and an 8%. Unfortunately, it's not listed as a strike skill, so you only get the 10% for the slam. The node above it here, Skull Crusher, is definitely a requirement for the build, and this is a 20% more damage. And if you don't know how damage calculations in this game work, the first node we looked at over here is increased damage. All increased damage is added together and becomes one multiplier. So let's pretend that we have both of these bonuses. This would be a 60% damage increase, but each time we add more increased damage, we're minimizing the effect that is actually giving us. Whereas this node is more damage. This will be a straight 20% damage increase on the top. Going down this path happens to give us a jewel node, which is nice. We're probably going to end up taking the critical damage here. We also have nearby sources of rage, and considering we're using all melee attacks, rage is probably something we're going to want to make sure we get. These nodes here will really help you get your armor off the ground. We've got a lot of percentage increased armor, and this is also increasing our stun threshold and our armor against critical hits. Moving down the tree some more, we've got some nice critical damage here that doesn't take much of an investment. And again, a bonus against stunned enemies. Down below, we've got Hefty Unit, which is helping us get that stun threshold up even higher. And it scales with our strength, which is nice. Next to it, we've got Perfect Opportunity, and this is one that I do think I'm going to end up keeping in the build. Against heavy stunned enemies, we're getting lucky, which means it's going to roll our damage twice, and it'll pick the higher number. That means when the Hammer of the Gods hits, it's going to be the most significant damage. Down below, we've got some nice area damage, a little bit more aid to armor break, and more importantly, Authority, which is cooldown reduction and area of effect, both things we really like. This node I only took because I happen to have some evasion. You don't necessarily need this if you don't have any evasion gear on. But if you do have a hefty amount of evasion, this is worth taking. Another jewel node next to it, and one more cooldown reduction node. Now I did a respec and I took out my volatile catalyst, and I definitely noticed the impact of the cooldown reduction being gone, but it's hard to invest this far over unless we have something else in the area we end up taking. We do have two-handed damage stuff here, but I don't like the reduced attack speed, so we'll see if I end up taking this. Also, if we end up having a shield, we may end up using Lay Siege, and we have multiple block nodes along the path. So it's possible that we'll change up for that as well. And I highly doubt it, but there is one more cooldown node all the way over here. So I would only go for this if I really felt like the duration was worth it. And actually, feel free to clarify this for me. Does the skill effect duration from this negatively impact certain things, like the amount of time it takes for Hammer of the Gods to drop? Or does it only affect positive things, like our time freeze? If you happen to know, drop a comment. Here's an overview of the whole thing. And don't forget, I've got a written guide link below the video. Now, itemization is an area that I'm going to have to wait and give you guys more specifics later. But right now, I'm focusing on getting as much physical damage as possible, trying to upgrade my armor so I can increase my resistance to physical damage, maintain all of my max resistances, and slowly adding in chaos resistance as I get it. I'm still considering whether or not I want to go with a one-hander and an offhand, and potentially bring block into the equation. There are some juicy one-hander nodes, so it may not be as big of a damage loss as I think. But let me know if you guys think we should keep using the two-hander or swap to a one-hander and a shield. We're also fairly close to Giant's Blood, so it would be nice if all of my armor could be purely strength-based, and then I'd be able to focus all of my stats into strength, which we even have some nodes that we can scale off of as well. And we're close to the polymathy if we end up needing more for our requirements. Again, let me know if you guys think Giant's Blood is worth it. Now, to make sure you're on the same page as me, you can either go to the written guide underneath the video, or follow along here. So on my Mace Strike, I'm using Heavy Swing, Overpower, Close Combat, and Life Thief. For my swap weapon, I'm only using it sometimes if I need my Leap Slam to deal less damage. And you might be asking, why would I possibly want that? Well, in order to get the Bone Shatter window in order to kill enemies, you want to leap onto them, but not actually fully stun them. So if you're doing too much damage, Leap Slam is going to cause them to be stunned instead of opening up the window so you can use Bone Shatter. On Time Snap, I'm using Ingenuity and Second Wind, and I think once I have Time Freeze, I'm going to be swapping my Second Wind over to that. But that's something I'm going to have to experiment with. I currently have nothing in my Temporal Rift. There's not a lot good for it, but we'll see. In Hammer of the Gods, I'm running Brutality, Concentrated Effect, and Inevitable Critical. In my Leap Slam, I'm running Martial Tempo, Rage, and Holy Descent. In my Bone Shatter, I'm running Impact Shockwave, Exploit Weakness, and Magnified Effect. In my Ancestral Warrior Totem, I'm running Ancestral Urgency, Armor Breaker, and Demolisher. We're really only using this to put next to unique mobs so that it can break their armor. But it worked for rare mobs as well, and sometimes I just use it to distract enemies. For Berserk, we're running Clarity and Vitality. For Time of Need, we're running Fast Forward and Precision. For Scavenged Plating, we're running Persistence. You can also run Overwhelming Presence if you're not stunning enemies fast enough. And if you're short on Spirit, you might not need the Precision, and you probably also don't need the Clarity. There's also a really powerful unique hammer called Hrimnor's Hymn, and if you happen to get it, you can use it, but you'll have to compare it to your rare item and see if it's better. I'm going to be continuing to develop this build over time, and I'll make sure to drop you guys any updates I have. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'm live on Twitch every day at twitch.tv/screamheart. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.
Stop every time!